morning, everyone. Thank you very much for coming to this international symposium entitled Designing the Future of Fisheries Certification Scheme. Before we go into the opening remarks, there are a couple of logistical announcements that we would like to make. First, when you go out, please make sure that you fill in the questionnaire. We will be grateful because when we design the symposium next time, your answers will be very helpful for us to design new symposium. The other thing is these receivers. These are very expensive, so please make sure that to return the receiver when you go home. So having said that, I would like to welcome Professor Nobuyuki Yaki to make the opening remarks.
Hi, hello. Good morning, everyone. My name is Yagi. I'm an organizer of this symposium. I'm working for the University of Tokyo. My area of study is fisheries and fisheries policy, economics, those sort of social science issues. First of all, I would like to express my sincere appreciation for our friend coming all the way from abroad. I very much appreciate your time and effort to attend this symposium. This is the symposium. The purpose is to learn your experiences and to exchange views for further advancement of the Japanese ecosystem eco-labeling scheme. In this sense, I very much appreciate your input to this symposium. To tell the truth, we are holding many symposiums in this room. For example, 2 months ago, we had a symposium on UN so-called BBNJ, biological diversity beyond national jurisdiction, which is the UN negotiations. And we invited many other diplomats, including a Japanese representative of foreign ministry, but not much attendance. But today, there are many attendance. I'm very happy. For example, I think 4 or 5 years ago, the EU Fisheries Commissioner, Her Excellency Maria Damanaki, she came to this room and she made a presentation on EU fisheries policy. But unfortunately, the turnout rate, the attendance was not so high compared with this situation. So I'm very happy that the people showed the good attendance on this meeting. So I will stop here, but I have several the housekeeping issues. Every speaker has 25 minutes. Actually, you have 30 minutes, but in 25 minutes speak time and 5 minutes question and answer. We also have a question and answer in the evening stage. So, let's see. Okay, from 4 o'clock to 4:50, we have 15 minutes of question and answer time. But after each speech, we will have a short question and answer time also. To enforce the timekeeping, I can't show you this sort of to remind the time. Okay, yeah, thank you very much, and I hope the very useful exchange of views and discussion. Thank you very much.
So we would like to welcome our first speaker, Christian Thorensen from Iceland Responsible Fisheries. So Mr. Christian Thorensen, please.
First, I would like to thank. Better. Good morning, everyone. First, I'd like to start by thanking the organizers for inviting me and arranging this symposium. I'm very pleased to be here. I work for the Icelandic fishing industry in an organization called Fisheries Iceland, which has the processors and the fishing vessel owners and the main export fishing companies as members. And I've been working on certification issues now for 21 years. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. And we're talking about the certification of well-managed fisheries. That's the topic. And I've chosen the subtitle, Sustainability Comes From Within. Sustainability is not something that you buy from somewhere else off the shelf. It's something that you develop in your own society, something you apply in your own activities. Now, just to tell you a little bit about why there's all this emphasis on certification of well-managed fisheries for conservation and sustainable use. You could say it all starts with adoption of the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization's Code of Conduct for Responsible Fisheries. And that code was negotiated because, by the United Nations, because there had been problems on many fishing grounds, overfishing problems. And some of the examples are famous. Things like overfishing in the North Sea, the cod at Newfoundland and Labrador, Great Northern Cod, which collapsed back in 1992, 3, something like that, and has not recovered yet. A huge cod stock. Now these developments, among others, they led to the creation of the FAO Code of Conduct for Responsible Fisheries, the international community's response to this. And what the code does, among other things, it defines what constitutes good fisheries management practice, and in particular, in that regard, the precautionary approach. And of course, the code is on the website of the FAO, and it's a well-known international document. So what's it all about? Well, like I said, it's the Code of Conduct of Responsible Fisheries. And what we're talking about is certification with emphasis on products not originating from overfishing. And the key concept is the precautionary approach to fisheries management. And that's something that we all need to understand if we're going to get anywhere in the discussion on this certification. Recruitment overfishing is when you fish the stock to such an extent that the biomass goes way down and the spawning stock biomass is not able to produce strong year classes after that. So the stock is down and you get poor year classes. And the simple argument is without parents you're not going to get any offspring. So that's the sort of connection. Now how do we do that? The first thing we do is we have to have relatively low harvest rates, relatively low fishing pressure. That's good for many reasons. You have larger fish stocks, you have less risk due to the fisheries or fisheries collapse, you have better economics because when you have more fish, you catch more fish per hour and there's a lower cost, so you have many benefits from that. So keep the harvest rate down, then you have to set target reference points and limit reference points. And in particular here, the limit reference points that I want to point out have to do with setting a limit where you don't want the biomass to go below that limit. You want to make sure that you have enough parents to generate new year classes that you use. And then, and a very important point is that you, at the same time, have what's often called pre-agreed measures. You decide before you get there, before you get into trouble, what you will do in management when you get there. And based on my experience and the experience of many other people in fisheries management, this is very important. Because if you wait and you don't decide beforehand what you're going to do, when you get into a situation when you think you're going to have difficulty, you will risk starting negotiating with yourselves and saying, well, yeah, it's difficult, but we'll wait until next year to do something about it, because it's so difficult. And and then maybe wait until next year after that. And then you will just lose your fish stock. So the idea is you decide beforehand what you do and you adopt the proper measures when you get them. So these are key concepts. Okay, now following the code. Once the code has been adopted, you could say that states have agreed what constitutes good fisheries management. And so people said, therefore, how do we hold them accountable? How do we make sure that they do what they said is the right thing to do? And one answer there was certification and eco-labeling. Just check what they're doing and make it transparent and all that. So I'm going to tell you a little bit, can you hear me? Okay. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history of these things very briefly. The Code of Conduct was 1995. Already in 1996, we have a lot of discussion of certification. We have, you're familiar with the MSC, I'm sure. There was the MSC initiative, which was two parties, WWF, Environmental Organization, and Unilever, an international corporation, which got together and formed the Marine Fuel Council Initiative. And I sat some meetings in Nordic groups where these representatives from these people came, and they told us very bluntly that you guys have failed to manage fisheries, and the market will now take over fisheries management from the government. And we will be the medium. That was sort of the very aggressive message that we got in the beginning. People did not like that message. Fisheries management people, fishing industry, etc. So it was a very difficult discussion. The Nordic Council of Ministers formed a contact group. I was a member of that group, started in 1996. And that group took the matter to the FAO and asked the FAO to develop guidelines. That we did on behalf of the Nordic countries. That did not go through in the beginning. Then we formed what we called the criteria group, which I chaired, also Nordic Council of Ministers, where we sort of started designing how we thought this could be done, what requirements should be in the standards, that sort of thing. And based on all this work, we finally got a proposal accepted at the UN, and the guidelines work, the FAO, and the guideline development started in 2003. And just from a personal point of view, I was very much involved in that. I was chair of the expert consultations twice, 2003 and 2008, so I'm very familiar with all of this work. And this was done, of course, it was a Nordic initiative, and Iceland was in a leadership role, and that's, of course, the Minister of Fisheries that leads this kind of work. And we got this through after a lot of negotiation, and the guidelines were adopted by the FAO member states in 2005 and extended in 2009. So these are voluntary guidelines, but they are internationally adopted guidelines. But just to tell you what this is, what we're thinking here, sustainable use is the core. We must have a good story to tell. If we're not doing things well, there's no point in going further with eco-labeling programs, with benchmarking, everything else. You have to have the fisheries management done properly. And so certification basically is confirmation after the fact. First you do the fisheries management, not the other way around. And just to point this out, that fisheries management is to some extent, depending on where you are, a centralized government activity. So it's not something that individual companies can do, like in many other kinds of certification. You certify in government activity. We developed, after the guidelines were available, the Icelandic fishing industry took the initiative to develop a certification program, did this in cooperation with the government and the Marine Research Institute and the Director of Fisheries and everybody involved. Based on the FAO code and the guidelines, we set up an independent technical committee or technical committee with independent experts. So in other words, they are not representatives of anybody. It should work in that way. That's a typical way to do this in certification. And then we have third-party certification, which is done by an Irish certification body. It's based on ISO standards for certification and accreditation. formally accredited by an international accreditation forum certification body. These are all technical things that I'm speaking of, but without going into too much detail, it's very important in certification schemes that there are different roles and they are performed by independent agents. So that goes to the credibility of what you're doing. And that's key in everything. Avoidance of even the appearance of conflict of interest. We got the first certification in 2010, and then you will hear more about this from the next speaker. Our program was recognized by the GSSI in 2016. And that's something that that people are considering here with the Japanese program as well. Now, why did we take this initiative? Well, it's a national initiative, but it's an international approach, the same as the taking here. We want to document well-managed fisheries in Iceland. We want to serve the needs of our business partners for assurance. We want to preserve the principles adopted by the international community. I will say a little bit more about that. These are from the guidelines. Equivalence, competition, avoidance of barriers to trade. These are all things from the guidelines. And we believe that choice is essential. You have to have more than one choice for certification. And then to promote the United Nations Fisheries Management Principle. The FAO guidelines, the code of the guidelines. So that's back to the source. That's where all this started. And just to say a little bit about credibility and trust, the principal benefit that you get out of certification, if all works well, is consensus for better discipline in fisheries management. The works get you to a point where everybody understands, has a common understanding of what we're doing. And now the next point may be difficult to achieve, but in my opinion, the desirable unit for certification, what to certify, is thus the same as for fisheries management. The unit stock or stocks and the community harvesting them, if you can link that. That can be difficult in some cases, it's a complicated question. But if you can achieve that, that makes everything very simple. And then I just want to make the point that consensus is not best delivered by external parties. That's something that you do within the community. Don't get that, don't import consensus in your books. What are the advantages here that we were looking at in developing a national or which might also apply with you during regional certification programs? Well, first, it's a cooperative community effort, like I said before. And the drive comes from within. The motivation and the drive, the work comes from within your community. Promotes community consensus for good fisheries management. And it fosters a sustainability culture. That's an important point. You're creating a culture in your own community for sustainability. So you're working with sustainability. That's very important. When you do this, you can write the standards in such a way that you can match the standards with the management approach, which simplifies things. You are more specific in the clauses of the standard, and you can have more rigorous matching and testing when you meet the standard part. And basically, the effective message is what we're looking for, effective communication and the building of trust. And also what I think is an important point is that it then becomes our message. And we get credit for delivering our message and delivering a truthful message. And that's much stronger than if you get that from the outside. Now, I want to just say a little bit about current practice and some challenges and caveats. And just, this is looking towards the future, and take this in the spirit that this is intended to be food for thought, things that we need to be watchful for. I have, of course, some examples of these problems, but I'm not going to say that these problems are the rule. I think constructive criticism is necessary. I'm not going to spend much time on this, but we know that certification has become important in the market, and this means that people are very sensitive, can be sensitive to criticism. But we're not going to worry about that, because criticism is important to enhance the quality and credibility of what we're doing. We must be able to discuss it. I'm going to discuss 4 issues of concern. The first one is that we must avoid private monopoly of standards. That's a serious thing. It's serious because certification is being used to decide who can sell fish and who can't sell fish in the shops. So if you have a private monopoly of standards, that's not good government, in my opinion. I also worry that priorities in certification requirements can become skewed. I will explain that. There is also this thing that everything that is sold must be certified, and I think if that's the case, then we risk the whole thing just coming off the tracks. And then I worry a little bit about the misdirection of effort and human resources. Now, this is a quote actually from myself, highly unusual to do that. But this is something that has been quoted quite a lot and used quite a lot, and I think it's a succinct phrase, so I will use it. This is from 2011. And I said then, I still believe it, the fishing industry simply cannot, as a matter of principle and form, tolerate a situation where a single private entity, on the basis of a changeable private standard, has sole authority to decide who can sell seafood to the public and who cannot. You can see the situation I'm painting here. And I would think, and I actually know, government in many countries has the same concerns. They would not be able to tolerate that. For this reason as well as others, there must be more than one option to choose from. And then I'm thinking about the international market. And it's your choice which one you use, of course. Now, skewed priorities, we've seen some of that. It is essential that standards be clear, that it's clearly understood what is required to get certification. And it's important to emphasize that the main requirements must be in accordance with the UN FAO documents. That's where the core is. Certification bodies and schemes must avoid prioritizing popular issues over the essential core requirements of fisheries management. That can happen, and that does happen. Then people downplay the hardcore fisheries management issues and start getting interested in promoting instead environmental issues, or which would be side issues to the main message in their certification. Now, that's not to say that environmental issues aren't important. It's just to say that the main emphasis in this should be on conservation and sustainable use of fisheries resources. And this is important because we need to avoid demands for skewed priorities in management measures and marine research, since available resources, money and manpower, are always limited. And this danger is typically present when discounts, as I call it, are given from core requirements. And we've seen examples where certification bodies come in and they start focusing on issues that should be minor issues and not core issues in the certification. And the government starts diverting money and diverting people away from the important tasks in the core towards the issues that the certification body is emphasizing. So this is something to avoid. And now I mentioned this earlier, everything must be certified. The idea was that well-managed fisheries should be certified. But we are seeing the scoring practice in certification where you can get certification with a low score for the main requirements. Okay, that can be debated whether that should be done or not. But there are cases where the performance on the main requirements are so low, so that the emphasis moves over to other things. And in my opinion, it is essential that international requirements be met when certification is awarded. So I think this is a major worry. And if you set the bar too low and give what I call discounts and deferrals in meeting the standard, which is you pass with a low score, very low score, and you're given a long time to meet the requirements, then I think the boundary really has blurred. Certification is not telling you that the fishery is well managed and for sustainability. It's telling you that the fishery has entered a fisheries improvement program, which is something very different. So the question then here becomes very simply, where is the boundary between fishery improvement programs and certification of well-managed fisheries. And that boundary is not fixed, and it varies from one certification body to another, from one case to another. And I think that's a real problem in all of this. I mentioned this before, not going to spend much time on that, but I think there's a problem in all of this. If we don't have a goal straight and priorities, then the resources we're using, in particular the important people with the expertise, they are being taken away from what is important to do things that are less important. And that's not why we started with certification. That's what we want, what we intend with all of this. Here's a point that I think is key in many situations. It's an extra point. This is from the guidelines, the quote. Because here you have different management units and different cooperatives, I believe. Management in the North Atlantic, you have fish stocks that are shared between different countries that then have to come together to manage. And in this context then, let me read that paragraph from paragraph 25 of the FAO guidelines. In assessing compliance with certification standards, the impact on the stock under consideration of all the fisheries utilizing that stock under consideration over its entire area of distribution are to be considered. So the point being very simply, if you have one biological stock or more that you're certifying, but management is split up geographically, if you certify fishery in one area, you have to look at what the fisheries in all the areas are doing to that stock. So you can't say, I am fishing responsibly, I am not overfishing, it's those other people who are overfishing the same stock. No. If the stock is overfished, nobody gets certified. So that's just a key point here. Very briefly, because of the time, I'm going to tell you a little bit here about the FAO guidelines, the scope and future developments. I just want to make a key point. The scope of certification is defined in the FAO guidelines as follows. These guidelines are applicable to eco-labeling schemes that are designed to certify and promote labels for products from well-managed marine captive fisheries and focus on issues related to sustainable use of fisheries resources. This is the scope, that's all it is. There are other things that, we look at. We look at the management, we look at environmental impact, or ecosystem impact considerations, but this is the absolute core of what we do. Management for conservation and sustainable use. That's the key thing. So therefore, if following the FAO guidelines, then we must address effective fisheries management in a serious manner. That is always the challenge when you're going for a certification program. Furthermore, the scope is limited. We have a section in the guidelines that's called minimum substantive requirements and criteria. It tells you what you need to meet in order to be certified, what the requirements are. There is also validation of standards, and it says two things. First, when you've written the standard, you must check that in the standard contains everything that the guidelines say it must contain. The other thing is you have to check that the standard does not contain things that don't meet the scope, that are outside the scope. And there was quite a lot of negotiation and discussion about what this means. So this means that the scope is circumscribed, it's within a box. Okay? But this does not preclude certification from addressing other issues, but then that's under other schemes. If you want to have quality issues, food safety issues, social issues, that's not in certification programs or schemes following the FAO guidelines. You have to do that in other schemes if you want to follow the guidelines. And just to further echo that point, this is from the principles, paragraph 2 of the guidelines, I think it is. Principle for eco-labeling schemes underpin the international program, I say, and they're defined at the outset. They were defined at the outset. The first meeting we had on this in 1998 at FAO, technical consultation, and these include eco-labeling schemes should be of a voluntary nature and market-driven. They should be non-discriminatory and avoid And they should allow for fair trading competition. They should provide opportunity to enter international markets, and very importantly, they should be considered equivalent if consistent with these guidelines. Now, the idea about being equivalent means that they should also have equivalent scope consistent with the guidelines. So you're not going to have equivalent programs if some include, say, food safety and others don't. Then you have very different programs. So this is a key issue in the negotiations and the agreement among the states that broke the guidelines. It was a sensitive issue. Now, a little bit about the way forward. This is just that we must insist on effective fisheries management and the code of conduct. And this is about objective funding of fact. It's not a magical mystery tour, to put a phrase. This is a technical thing to get certification. And there is a need for independent benchmarking to the FAO guidelines. It has been all along. And the way the world is approaching that nowadays, hopefully very successfully, we'll see. That's with the GSSI, and we'll hear more from the next speaker on that. So we must keep at it, maintain choice, and move forward. And just to bring it in more forcefully, this main point, that the proper certification is not scientific research, it is not fisheries advice, and it is certainly not fisheries management. It is something else. Certification includes verification that research and fisheries advice is based on generally accepted methodology, verification, but it's a task for others to actually do the research and the fisheries advice. And certification and equilibrium is not fisheries management. Fisheries management remains the task of the competent authorities. However, certification entails or includes, among other things, third-party verification of government fisheries management performance, which facilitates market access for seafood. And the key question, going back to the code in 1996, is this: do authorities meet the commitment